Welcome to another episode of Chilling with the Renegade Scientist. My guest today is Douglas Counters. He is a writer and maker of Christian movies. Welcome, Douglas.
Thank you, Trey.
So Douglas wanted to have a conversation about evolution, and obviously he has some difficulty embracing the truth. So Douglas, let's just first off and tell me why you were anti-science.
Hold on. I'm not anti-science. I am anti-pseudoscience and definitely anti-political science, which involves this study where the results are intentionally skewed based on who paid for the research. For example, a study on the dangers of butter paid for by the margarine industry or vice versa. Not all quote-unquote science is equal, you know? Me, I'm all about the truth.
Me too. So what is your primary objection to evolution?
Oh, so many to choose from. Well, my biggest objection is this, that despite the fact that the ideas generated by evolution concerning the flora and fauna that we see around us, they're historical in nature, can't be replicated and tested in the laboratory using a scientific method. Even though that's true, these ideas are forced down kids' throats and other people's throats all over the world as if they're slam dunk factual. And no real discussion about other explanations and possibilities is even permitted.
Okay, so just to be clear here, you are not advocating that the teaching of evolution be removed from the classroom.
Not at all. No, my mantra is teach the controversy. Get kids to thinking, you know. Present the idea, it's one that's been believed by billions of people over the centuries, that an omnipotent creator designed this universe, and specifically this planet and all the life forms therein, right alongside Darwin and all those neo-Darwinists who evolved his theory.
That's material for religion class, and religion and science should not be mingled.
Well, my definition of science is the discovery by man of the world that God created with all its laws and its elements and its properties, as confirmed by the scientific method.
I'm afraid, Douglas, you don't get to define science. You should probably stick to defining religion.
Bible already did that. James wrote that pure religion is to visit widows and orphans in their distress and keep oneself unspotted from the world.
Oh, I bet the Muslims and the Hindus and the Jews and about a zillion other religions are just thrilled to hear that. And by the way, there are a lot of atheists who give charity to orphans and widows and live according to their own moral standards.
Oh, so everyone gets to set their own moral standards? There's no universal standard that applies to everybody?
Well, that's the beauty of not believing in God. He can't force his values onto us. But we digress. Our conversation was supposed to be focused on evolution. Let's get back on track.
Okie dokie. Let me throw some names at you.
Okay.
Franklin Harold, who happens to be a biochemist, that's a scientist.
Duh, Douglas.
He wrote in a book that was published by Oxford University Press, there are presently no detailed Darwinian accounts of the evolution of any biochemical or cellular system, only a variety of wishful speculations.
Well, that's one man's opinion.
One scientist's opinion.
Okay, one scientist's opinion, but there are a myriad of other scientists who will disagree with him. And one thing I think we have to point out here right now is that interpretation is key in the quest for truth. First, Douglas, there's the interpretation of the evidence itself. And then we have to interpret the words of the scientists who are describing their interpretation of that evidence.
That's a good point. Yeah, but what did Harold really mean when he said detailed Darwinian accounts? It seems like the devil's always in the details, huh?
Well, I don't believe in the devil.
Go figure. Well, in my experience, just about every evolutionist interprets all evidence as confirming evolution. And if they can't do that, they either reject that evidence or ignore it, along with the people who bring that evidence to the table.
You creationists have such a persecution complex.
Well, maybe with reason. You know, it's bad enough to ignore evidence, but I think it's even worse to manufacture it, and you guys do that sometimes. Let me cite a concrete example. Don't worry, I won't mention Nebraska Man or Haeckel's drawings. Richard Dawkins likes to demonstrate how evolution works using a computer program analogy. So there's a computer program that's going to spell out a phrase, "Me thinks it is like a weasel." So let's see if I can explain this so even a scientist can understand it. Let's start with the letter A. So we got a one-celled organism, an A.
Okay.
Well, the computer is going to generate a new letter, and it's going to compare that against it and see if it gets a capital M, because it's looking for a capital M. And it gets an O. It says, no, throw it away. Goes again. It randomly generates another mutation. It's a P. Throw it away. And then it comes up with a capital M finally, and it mutates that A into an M. So now we got an M. But it keeps on generating mutations. And we come across, finally, after about 25 tries, a small E. So now it appends that onto the M. Now we got a two-celled organism. It spells M-E. And it continues that whole process until it spells out, "Me thinks it is like a weasel." And then the program just stops.
And your point?
My point, first of all, the computer knows the answer. It knows where to drop in every one of those letters and knows when to stop. Natural selection doesn't have any intelligence to make such a decision. You know, it doesn't know what the goal is. In fact, it doesn't understand goals. It doesn't have any understanding. It doesn't have any intelligence. It don't know squat. You know, it doesn't have any brakes either and can't start mutations and much less stop them. So in real life, if you've got to have mutations happening, there's nothing to stop them. We could have ended up with a sentence, "Me thinks Richard Dawkins is a weasel." You know, this whole analogy is a logical hot mess. But when Richard Dawkins trots out his little dog and pony show, people like you stand up and cheer. And if someone like me says, "You know, the emperor doesn't have any clothes on," we get laughed out of Dodge City like we're some kind of idiots.
You know, I don't know enough about computers to doubt or even criticize Dawkins.
Oh, how convenient. Well, I do. In fact, out of curiosity, I wrote a program to do exactly this. It took me 17 minutes. Runs on my PC in less than a second. It took about 8,000 on average mutations to spell out the whole phrase.
Am I supposed to be impressed with that?
Fat chance of that, but that's not my goal. Let me drop another name here. James Tour is a scientist who likes to debate other scientists using science only, even though he is a Christian. But his opponents always attack his scientific arguments by labeling him as a Christian and a creationist, as if that invalidates any evidence that he brings to the table. He goes out of his way not to mention God, and they always have to bring up the fact that he is religious.
Tour is an idiot.
So you've solved one of his challenges? You know, he said that if anybody solves one of them, he'll take down every one of his videos.
Douglas, he specializes in the origins of life. That does not involve evolution, which is my focus and involves the changes within life, not its inception. And that's also not the focus of our discussion today. I really hate to come across sounding like a dictator here, but I must insist that we keep our conversation steered towards that topic. So, okay, just so we're on the same page, what is your definition of evolution?
Definitions are critical.
Yeah?
In fact, we should have started this discussion with this question. Okay, my definition of evolution involves macroevolution. I have no problem with microevolution, which is changes and adaptations within a species. Now, macroevolution is the goo to you via the zoo theory that all life started out as one-celled organisms and progressed through millions of years through gradual, non-directed mutations to the DNA, which proved to be advantageous to survival.
Really? Well, no wonder you'd have a problem with that. I would have a problem with evolution based on that definition. You know, evolution is so much more complex than just mutation selection. First of all, microevolution demonstrates the process that leads to macroevolution. And there's lots of other changes that are involved than just mutation selection. Are you familiar with the term epigenetics?
No.
Okay, how about alleles?
No.
Okay, I thought so. Well, without any changes to the DNA sequencing, epigenetic expression changes lead to new functionality in the phenotype containing that DNA. And the natural stressors also lead to such alterations. Without such knowledge, Douglas, you're not equipped to just go poking holes in any scientific theory. And there's lots of Christians out there who accept both God and evolution. The two don't have to be mutually exclusive. Though, I personally find the idea of God in heaven to be repulsive.
Well, Richard Dawkins did say one thing that I agree with. He said that the Bible, the God of the Bible, and macroevolution are not compatible. They can't coexist. You know, if God created everything, all life, as he says he does in the Bible, and there is evolution, that means that he created all those beings with the ability to mutate and to evolve, which means there was intelligence involved and he directed it. And by very definition of evolution, which you will admit, there can be no direction or intelligence involved. You know, to rephrase the old chicken versus egg question, which came first, DNA or the first mutation that brought about a change? And while you're struggling with that conundrum, I'm going to throw out the bold statement that only a creator could explain the coding sequences that we find in DNA.
Well, let me throw out a name for you, Douglas. Stephen Hawking. Stephen Hawking said religion is a fairy tale for people afraid of the dark.
And John Lennox said that atheism is a fairy tale for people afraid of the light.
Brother, Lennox is a mathematician and a senile old man.
Senile? It's probably your assessment of me. You know, I really think that we cannot preclude common sense and logic when we're discussing science, which can't be proven in the lab with scientific method. You know, to actually arrive at truth, we have to be able to follow evidence where it leads. You know, if you omit design as a possibility of explaining the complexity and the diversity of life around us, I'm afraid that you've eliminated the possibility of obtaining truth.
And around and around and around in circles we go. Douglas, I'm just afraid we're not going to agree on this.
Could be. I would just advise you that eternity is a long time to be wrong.
Oh, was I supposed to be afraid of that? Okay, well, we're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back with more scintillating debate on Chillin' with the Renegade Scientist. Be right back.